Hey everyone, announcer of games here. Finally released from Nurgle's Garden, as I've been sick for 2 fucking weeks. Ah! Anyway, so why are you seeing the real me? Why is it not the mole? Where is the mole, you may be asking? Well, he's currently busy working on Halo 2, and I have been seeing a conversation go on Twitter. I don't care. It's called fucking Twitter. It's never gonna be X. It will always be Twitter. Anyway, so what the fuck is happening on Twitter? Well, the 40k community, when not having an aneurysm, is basically talking about and asking the question, why is Horus Heresy units not playable within Warhammer 40k anymore? Because back through basically every other edition, Horus Heresy units were playable and had playable stats within the realm of 40k. Sorry, I'm still getting over the cold. So, there are multiple reasons as to why, but I am on the side of, yes, I think Horus Heresy units should be playable within Warhammer 40k with some caveats to them. So, let's get into the reasons why. So, the first one is, well, what the hell is a Horus Heresy unit, and where the hell did this shit come from? So, Horus Heresy basically got its start on Forge World, which, if you don't know what Forge World was, it was basically an extension of Games Workshop that sold much more niche models for campaigns and such. That's where, like, Death Cores of Krieg came from. That's where, like, some Tyranid variants came from, so on and so forth. These units were designed to have more of a fleshed out, more narrative way of interacting with Warhammer 40k and just expand the model range in some form or another. And then in the 2010s, Horus Heresy was released as its own game, and it had a much more complex system, but more limited in models because it was Marine on Marine warfare, not Warhammer 40k. But a lot of units from that game, Horus Heresy, were playable within Warhammer 40k as they had stats that matched up. And then when 8th edition came around, all those Horus Heresy units got updated stats with all the other units from 40k. So all those armor values from like 6th and 7th edition were replaced with like toughness values, and everybody got keywords and all that kind of stuff. So units like the Leviathan Dreadnought, the Daredeo Dreadnought, the Deimos Predator Tank, and all these different kinds of units were brought in to Warhammer 40k from Imperial Armor indexes, which were controversial, to say the least, when it came to the competitive and the casual scene. Because, guess what? These things were not balanced for 40k. They were extremely overpowered, and then a lot of shit just kind of snowballed from there. For starters, the main problem is that not everyone who came into 40k knew about that, and those who did and weren't playing Marines didn't get the same options as the Marine players did. Yeah, it was very heavily in favor, if you were a Space Marine player, that you had a lot more options from Forge World than if you were playing a Xenos army. Now, alien armies got their own fair share of models. Orcs got a ton of different units. Eldar got a few, and Tau got a few. But, like, if you were, like, Dark Eldar or Necrons, you were pretty fucked, not gonna lie. But the main problem came from Space Marines. And the major culprit was the Leviathan Dreadnought. And you can blame 8th edition's Iron Hands Codex. Back in the early days of 8th edition, when the Iron Hands got their special Space Marine Supplement Codex, they had a few different special abilities that only their chapter got, which made them heavily fucking annoying. There was a stratagem which turned a dreadnought into a character. What the fuck is a Leviathan? A dreadnought. So, character rules is that you couldn't target characters if they were under 10 wounds. The Leviathan had 9 wounds at the time. So yeah, it got really bad. Not to mention that the Iron Hands also could repair it, give it a 5-up feel no pain, which basically means that on a roll of a 5 or higher, they just ignored a single point of damage for every 5 they rolled, and they could just always protect it. I have a friend who basically played a Knight Army, and he ran his best competitive list against this one Iron Hands army. He could not even scratch that Leviathan Dreadnought, and Knights can basically one-shot most units in the game. So, what the fuck? This incident led to one of the most boring finals in Warhammer 40k competitive history, because it was Imperial Fists versus Iron Hands. And the best way to put it was that it was the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, which made it one of the most boring games to watch, as the Imperial Fists just refused to die, and the Iron Hands refused to take damage. It was miserable. And when you are trying to make a competitive scene, that is not something you want to see. When it's taking 2 hours to get through one turn, and that is annoying as fuck. So, what the hell? Well, for starters, the Leviathan Dreadnought, along with all those index units from that book, they didn't think that far ahead. They were just trying to get those units into 40k with abilities that would make sense for 40k. And so they had very little rules checks when it came to making them. So when that incident happened and 9th edition came around, all of these Forge World units got smacked real hard. And guess what? When units get nerfed, people don't buy them anymore. And so if people aren't buying them, it leads to a snowball effect again and again. So you had a broken set of units that basically broke your competitive scene in fucking half, and then you nerf it, so then no one wants to buy them anymore. So then if no one's buying them, what's the point in still making them? But they're still popular models. So, what the hell do we do? Well, this led to multiple different things. For one, the new Horus Heresy game. Now, I'm not saying that they made the new Horus Heresy game because, oh, no one's buying the Forge World models anymore. There's tons of other problems with that. What I am saying is that this was kind of a lose-lose situation, I guess. So, here comes Horus Heresy, like Dark Age Horus Heresy. The new Horus Heresy game with updated, remastered rules that basically simplify the game, but it's still that deep complexity that a lot of people were looking for with 40k. With it, all of those old Forge World Horus Heresy units, they have been solely locked to Warhammer 30k, Horus Heresy. They're solely locked in there. You cannot play Leviathan Dreadnoughts in 40k anymore. You can't bring the Deimos Predator in 40k anymore. So on, so forth. No more of that. They are locked to that timeline. Which kind of fucking sucks, doesn't it? Because a lot of people who weren't playing in the competitive scene still have those Horus Heresy units painted up in their 40k army colors. And not a lot of people want to play Horus Heresy. Not saying that Horus Heresy is a bad game. I love Horus Heresy. It's a fun-ass game. But not everyone wants to play that. And that's totally fair. So, what the hell? Well, to be honest, we don't really know the logic and the reasoning. This is more just speculation. And on my part, I speculate that they want to keep old era stuff out of 40k. Because 40k, when it comes to Marine stuff, they want to push the new Primaris stuff, like the Grav tanks, all the new Dreadnought variants. They want to push those models for 40k, and then push the other models for Horus Heresy, keep them separated. Which, that's a tactic, if that is the case. Not a good one, I don't agree with it, but it's a tactic. Secondly, if it's for the competitive scene, I kinda get it. Because, again, Unstoppable Force meets Immovable Object. Forge World units just were so fucking good. There was literally no reason not to take them if you were playing a competitive army. Most of the time, the main Codex units were used as meat shields for those Forge World units. For those Horus Heresy era units, like the Daredeo and the fucking Leviathan. There just wasn't a point to bringing anything else. Another problem was that, again, it came down to, oh, Space Marines are still getting more love than other armies. Now, Space Marines are the poster boys. They make up for 60% of most of GW's model sales. Wow, the poster boys are famous. What a shock. But they still have to try and sell the other armies, or else 40k is just a game of Space Marines. So, again, take away all those nastier models and start incentivizing people to buy the newer shit. I.e., start making new models, start really pushing them. It's why we're getting more army showcases and such, so that way people see that Warhammer 40k is not just power armor and spandex. So, then, what else is the problem? Well, Finecast. If you don't know what Finecast is a more finer material that GW invested in for a long while, claiming that the models were more detailed. These were not the best models. Yes, they had more detail, but they were much more annoying to paint, they were much more annoying to put together, and they were fragile as fuck, and sometimes they came bent and warped, with air bubbles clearly on the models. Finecast was not a good idea in the long run, and a lot of Forge World units and Horus Heresy units were made in Finecast. So, if people aren't buying models because Finecast, and Finecast is a much worse quality to make and to ship and everything else, we're going to switch it up. So a lot of Horus Heresy units are now being shifted over to the plastic models. I.e., the Leviathan got its own plastic model, the Daredeo got its own new plastic model, the Deimos Predator tank got its own plastic model. Tons of different units got their own plastic model kits, and they're still releasing more of them. But all those old resin kits are now discontinued. They aren't being printed anymore. They aren't being made anymore. So we've lost out on a lot of different things. In fact, a lot of other armies have lost a lot of their Forge World units, much like Orcs, much like Eldar, much like Tau. A lot of these Forge World units are just gone because of this new idea that resin is just being phased out, which really fucking sucks. Yes, resin was a shit material to work with, but At the same time, these units were pretty popular, but again, they weren't selling either. People loved them, but they weren't selling. So, what the hell? I know this is coming off more rambly, but just like follow me on this one. If models aren't selling, if no one is buying them or they aren't being bought at the frequency in which GW wants them to, they're gonna get the axe. It's the same deal with like what happened to Commissar Yarrick and Captain Badrook and all these other resin fine cast models. They weren't selling anymore, so get rid of them. Now, a lot of people will argue, well, why don't you just update the models? And that's a fair argument to make. Why didn't you just update those models and make them plastic? Then people would be more inclined to buy them. Well, to a company, it's just easier to stop making a thing than to basically try to really push the new model. So instead of just trying, they just said, fuck it. Which really sucks. Which really fucking sucks. Sorry, you're getting a water break. So, now we are at this point where we have plastic Horus Heresy units. Really, really good looking plastic Horus Heresy Marine units and Mechanicus units that look really, really damn fine. So, why are they not playable within Warhammer 40k? Even if they are just there for fun. Because, at the end of the day, what are we trying to balance the game for? Are we trying to balance it for fun, or are we trying to balance it for the competitive? I believe we can do both. And this is why I agree with bringing Horus Heresy units into 40k with a more nuanced take. So, what is my personal take? I want Horus Heresy units in 40k. I want to see Leviathan Dreadnoughts. I want to see Mechanicus units from 30k in 40k. I want to see 30k Imperial Guard in 40k. I want to see that because they're fun. They are fun models that really fit in with Warhammer 40k. And it's fun to see the old with the new. I love seeing like the new stuff in 40k right beside the old stuff. That is always so much fun to see. But as well, people still have those models, and not all of them want to just jump ship to Horus Heresy, because, again, Horus Heresy has a different rule set that is much more complicated than 40k, and not everyone's into that. And I totally get it. So, yeah, bring in the new, bring back the Horus Heresy units into 40k with updated rules. Now, I know GW would probably respond with, well, we have to try and balance that, we have to try to add them in properly, we have to give the new stat sheets, all that kind of stuff. Which, I get that takes time. I get it. But, come on! It is... If you're that worried, start hiring more people to start balancing that shit. You have competitive players that know what the hell they're doing and know what they're talking about, and you can bring them in and talk to them as well. And talk to your game designers as well, and basically figure out a way how to balance out Horus Heresy units into 40k. ah yes, go to the fans, go to the people that play the game, that know the game. You have competitive scene organizers that can basically say, yes, they should be able to do this, but be balanced so that this doesn't happen. And you can't plan for everything. That's just something you're going to have to accept, that you're going to have to put out fires when they pop up. Because, well, that's what happened with the Leviathan Dreadnought. It was a problem for months. Even when they hit it with one nerf, it still had like 5 other problems that need to be hit, and they had to keep hitting them till the Leviathan Dreadnought just wasn't this unstoppable force anymore. But yeah, they should bring back all these different units, especially for armies like Mechanicus. I've seen a lot of people in the Mechanicus playfield with all those players basically saying that a lot of the 30k Mechanicus units would solve a lot of the problems and spam that Mechanicus players have to do to, play the game competitively. And yeah, having more options for an army is really good. Having creative options to play different units so that not every army is a goddamn copy-paste is a good idea. I would love to see a guard army from one side just be the entire 30k line of a regiment of guardsmen using that old equipment, and another regiment of guardsmen that are just the new Cadian stuff. I would love to see those armies side by side. But if we're going to bring back Horus Heresy units, we also need to bring back all those Lost Forge World units too, because what I say here goes for there. I want more variety in my Imperial armies. I want more variety in my other alien armies. Bring back the Tau stuff. Make all those old prints into plastic. Yeah, I understand the logistics of that is a fucking nightmare. Because, what worked with one material now has to be reworked into a comprehensible fucking guide on how to build the models. And having to just rework stuff to fit within that new plastic mold, but it's still doable. You can do it. Would it take time? Yes. But it's taking time for everything fucking else too, so what else is stopping you? The idea here is that these models should be playable and accessible for most versions of Warhammer 40k. I.e., what's playable in 30k should be playable in 40k. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's dumb, because then the same logic can be applied that stuff in 40k should be playable in 30k. No. 30k has very much stated that it is a historical game for 40k, i.e., all these armies are only playable with these units because that's all they had back in the day. So, yeah, I understand that, the Primaris Gladiator tank would never appear within Warhammer 30k. But all that older tech is still in 40k, hence why it was playable in the fluff. And again, it's not that hard to do. Just talk to your community, talk to the competitive organizers, talk to those people that actually know and can actually give opinions on, hey, how do we balance this out? And just talk to your game designers about, how do we bring in Horus Heresy units into 40k? Not only would you expand your roster, you would basically be able to sell twice as many units as you would normally, because, well, hey, I can now use Leviathan Dreadnought again in Warhammer 40k. I was gonna build an entire company of Dreadnoughts. 3 Leviathans, 3 boxes, 3 Redemptors, so on and so forth. Because I think Dreadnoughts are fun. But I also would love to use the Deimos Predator tank. I think the Deimos Predator tank looks a lot better than the 40k Predator tank. But this all comes back to, well, they're removing a lot of the older models because they're out of date, they need to be updated, or they just don't want to update them anymore because they're not selling. And if a model's not selling, GW doesn't want to push it. Which, again, fair, but if a model's not selling, maybe look into why it's not selling. For one, like, as an example for Horus Heresy, I play Ultramarines. There is an Ultramarine squad that is $140 Canadian that is still fine cast, is annoying as fuck to build, and is only 5 models. Why the fuck would I ever buy that? And the problem is that it's a mainstay for an Ultramarines Legion list. So I either have to make my own with customized models to try and fit what that is, or I have to drop $140, and I refuse to go to any other third-party site because most of them are fucking scams. So I refuse to do that. And I don't have the resources for a 3D printer. Sorry, guys. I don't want to fucking do that. So maybe, you know, look at what the fuck you're selling us, and then ask yourselves, why is this not being bought? And don't just assume, oh, because people aren't wanting it. Because I do want the Caesarian Invictus squad. I do want them. I just don't want to spend $150 for 5 fucking models made out of a material I fucking despise. But as well, with the loss of Forge World units, it is really sad to see other armies just get the shaft because, well, all the older Space Marine units got moved to Horus Heresy, and a lot of the other resin kits just aren't selling, so get rid of them. In my opinion, bring them back, but if you're gonna have a problem with them in the competitive scene, either make them legends just for fun games, bring them with stats and everything just for fun, or actually do a massive full-on rework of all those old Forge World units, and you could sell them in a Forge World book like you did before. Just one massive index tome like you did before. And it's just like Space Marine armor, Imperial armor, Mechanicus armor, Eldar armor, all that kind of stuff. You can do that again. I know this has been more rambly than I intended it to be. Like I said, I have been sick for 2 fucking weeks, and it has been a nightmare for me. So, yeah, I just wanted to get this quick, close to 30-minute video out. Yeah. Bring back the Horus Heresy units into 40k, and while you're at it, bring in all those old Xenos units back into 40k as well, because I can promise you, if you reprint a lot of those models in plastic, and bring over the Horus Heresy plastic kits that you've made into 40k, you will find a lot more success. But yeah, this has been Announcer of Games with his fucking rambling tirade again, with his new mic. I got a new microphone. Huzzah! I'm no longer running this fucking garbage anymore. I'm sorry, baby. I love you. No longer running that anymore. This is the new life. This is the new world. And, yeah. Horus Heresy is a fun game, but I would also love to see those models in 40k. Talk to y'all later.